All right. All right. Welcome to Sacred Circle Podcast, Episode 1, where we invite people of all faiths and religions to discuss what matters the most in this world. So, let us start with introductions. Please say your name, whether you went to homeschool, private school, or government school, and your religion.
So, I'm Micah.
This is Mike.
Oh, I'm Micah, and I was homeschooled for 14 years, and then I went to public school, and then I went to a public charter school. So,
Christian the whole time?
yeah.
All right.
My name's Tristan Anderson, and I am 19 years old. I grew up homeschooled my whole life, but then for my final year as a junior, I graduated a year early going to a private school. So I have been a Christian the whole time, but I didn't actually believe in God until I was a Christian the whole time.
Yeah.
Didn't believe in God until I was like 16, and I went to a church camp. I'm a church camp kid. So I was converted when I was 16 years old.
All right. Nice.
And yourself?
Yes, of course. I am your host, Peter Hachidi. I spent my whole life in government school, and originally I was raised Catholic, but then my parents went to the Catholic Church, so we became non-denominational, technically Protestant. I've technically been a Christian my whole life, but I didn't really start looking into it myself and fully accepting all the truth claims and everything like that until the past couple of years.
Yeah.
So now we're here doing this.
All right.
All right. So, first question of the day, Christians. How old do you believe the Earth is? Let's start with you, Micah.
6,000 years old.
Why is that?
I asked one of my teachers, and he said it was 6,000 years old. I don't really have a reason.
That's fair.
I don't really have a reason,
Yeah.
but yeah,
Oh, so didn't you only spend like 1 year? You said you were homeschooled for most of your life, right?
yeah.
So
14 years.
one of your teachers at the charter school is who you asked?
No. My mom signed me up for Kids for Truth, and I asked one of the teachers there.
What's
So
that?
It's a church event or whatever for little kids.
Is it a VBS?
Yeah.
Okay.
Technically a VBS at a only King James Version church.
Interesting. And so this
So-
must have been a long time ago then, when you were young?
Yeah. I was at least 7 when that happened.
Okay, and so do you feel any sort of commitment to that age, or are you willing to accept that it could be a different?
I'm willing to accept it. I I didn't know anything
All
at
right.
that age, so.
And Tristan.
And I have one more question. What does it kind of make you feel when people talk about the Earth being billions of years old? Do you kind of have a knee-jerk reaction to that?
Dude, I cannot stand it.
Yeah.
I can't stand it at all. I'm
Yeah.
just like,
So you're pretty confident that the Earth is young.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So I originally actually probably believed that the Earth was billions of years old. I kind of started out that way because, when I was 14 or 15, I went through my intellectual pursuits. I really wanted to understand what I believed and why I believed it. And that actually kind of led me away from the faith for a small amount of time because what I was researching was not Christian ideas. I believed that what was true for a time was evolution and God wasn't real and the natural evolution of the universe. But when I turned 16, I knew that God was real. I was 100% sure on that. That wasn't changing. And my ideas kind of changed after that changed as well. So when I understood that God created the universe, I understood that it could have actually been made in 6,000 years. And I started to believe that that the Earth was young and that evolution wasn't true, and that that God made it all. So that's kind of the history of my beliefs.
Okay, nice. Well, then before we go further into Genesis, I definitely want to know what happened at 16. You said
Well,
you know 100% that God is real. So.
yeah. Well, at 16, I don't know the theology of this idea, but I feel like I felt God. Like I felt in the senses, like I felt that he was real, and it was one of those like crying at church camp moments, that like the classic. But I knew that God was real in that moment, and I knew that the best way to live, the true way to live, was pursuing God and living a righteous life without sin. And I knew that like raising a family, being fruitful, multiplying, working hard, I knew that there was something more to those values than just it makes you feel good. Like it was the right way to live. So there were just those two aspects to it. I knew that God was real because I experienced him, and I knew that what he said was true about living, because I felt when I lived that way that I was right with the universe. I was right with God. I was right with how it all worked. I shouldn't conflate those two ideas, but I was right with God.
And when you said crying at church camp, is that actually what happened, or was there some other
Yeah.
sort of? Oh, so it was a church camp.
Yeah, that is precisely what would happen. I was on my knees crying at church camp in front of the worship team, and I spoke with one of the leaders. I'm like, I want to be a Christian. Went home, got baptized. That's how it happened.
So was it like during worship? How did they get you to that?
Yeah. It was during worship. It was right after worship, or right after the sermon. And the dude was like, just the classic, like everybody come up and if you want to be a Christian. And I remember this little kid. He walked up before everyone else immediately. Once he asked everyone that wanted to be a Christian to come up to the stage, this little kid ran up before me, and then I was like, wow. If a little kid can do it, I can do it. So I got up out of my chair. I remember one of the people beside me, they like grabbed me. They're like, no, that's embarrassing. Don't do that. And so I ignored them. I walked up, and then, the rest is history. And
Rightfully so.
Yeah.
Nice. And wait, did you say you had a story like that too, or you were just like always confidently Christian the whole time?
Yeah.
Or there was a conversion moment?
There was a conversion moment in 8th grade. I kind of felt myself falling away from the faith. And, I started believing in evolution, actually. And the beginning of my freshman year, full restart, like full reboot.
So what happened? Why did you reboot?
Well, I hated 8th grade with a burning passion of 1,000 suns. Well, it wasn't a really good it wasn't really a good year for me mentally. So, but.
Well, so that's why you were falling away, right?
Yeah.
But then in 9th grade, you just weren't in 8th grade anymore, so you were happy again?
Yeah.
Conversion experience was graduating to high school.
All right, hey, I've never heard of anyone coming to God but in high school. That's a unique one.
Yeah, it happened during the summer.
Yeah.
I was I wasn't reading my Bible as much, but so I started reading the Bible more. Started
Well,
praying
wait,
more.
but I'm confused because at this time you were still being homeschooled, right?
Yeah, I mean, no. 8th grade, I went into a public school in 8th grade. That's why I hated it.
Oh, that was your first year in public school?
Yeah,
And then 9th grade,
public charter.
okay,
Yeah.
charter school. And so it's just all new people, I guess?
Yeah.
So maybe you just didn't get along with the kids in 8th grade?
In 8th grade, I had no friends.
Yeah,
So-
okay.
Yeah.
A lot of fake friends, right?
Yeah.
And moving into high school, you had a lot more.
Actual friends.
Yeah, good friends, good people, like not just degenerates, right?
Yeah, bro.
Yeah.
Interesting. But so then, I still didn't get what exactly brought you back to God. Just life being better again, so you started reading your Bible more, or what was it? What made you feel the connection with God?
Well, I started paying attention more at church, and then it just started tugging.
Okay, yeah.
About that tugging. But I was still handling depression. And the beginning of this year, I I started putting more into it. more started putting more work into my faith.
Okay.
So I'm reading my Bible every day. So
And it's only gone uphill from there, huh?
yeah.
All right, nice.
Is it possible that you were a Christian the whole time, but maybe during, or maybe it was a slow conversion, but ultimately, like in 8th grade, everything came to a head, and it was like you were kind of living like a non-Christian, and you kind of fell away from the faith and realized, hey, this isn't the right way. So you kind of changed your ways, but maybe you still believed in God or something like that.
Yeah.
Maybe you still had the faith of your younger years, and it just became mature. I don't know, something like that.
Yeah, so like, what specifically has been your relationship with the truth claims of Christianity? That there is a single monotheistic God. Let's just start with that one. So did either of you ever not believe that? You firmly believed that there was no God?
Well, yeah, I thought that there was no God for a small time, but every other time I've known that there was a single, God.
And what about you? Did you ever completely deny God?
No.
Okay. Yeah, so for me, I definitely didn't completely ever deny him either, but do you guys know what deism is?
Yep.
Yeah, so I had a deist phase where I just believed, like, he's so grand and extraordinary that there's no way he could actually care about any of us individually or have a personal relationship with us. But then, I got into the historical facts of how God has intervened in history, and specifically Jesus, and I was like, okay, this is he definitely does care about us on an individual level. So now I want to go back to both you mentioned evolution. So before specifically evolution, what do you think the relationship is between Christianity and science in general? Do you think they are at odds, or I don't know? What do you have to say about that?
Yeah, I think no, I don't think that they're at odds. I think that a lot of science. I think that people are coming into science with potentially some bias, and I think that clouds people's judgment. One thing that I learned when researching Christianity, I became overwhelmed at the ambiguity of certain texts, and even the ambiguity of certain scientific data, and how there's so many different things that you can take two ways, and so it complicated things a lot. But I think that there is more logical evidence toward Christian views of sciences. So that's what I believe. I believe that there's atheist views of science, and I think there's Christian views of science. Each person takes their own philosophies into their interpretation of the sciences. Does that kind of make sense?
Yes, I think that's pretty accurate, actually. It's about what it actually is. Do you have any anything to say about science?
I agree with everything that he was saying, but the kind of science that I was exposed to was the atheist kind of science. So I feel like.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that's what we're given in general in schools, because your religion determines how you see the world and like certain assumptions you make about the world. And all right, I'm gonna drop some philosophical language here. So there's different kinds of causes in the world. So like, if I turned on my heater to boil water to make tea, and you could say, why is the water boiling? And I could give a big example of like the thermodynamics of the heat transfer between the electric bottom and the water and phase change chemistry, stuff like that. Or I could say it's boiling because I want to make tea. So there's the material causes was the thermodynamics and science and stuff. And just saying I want to make tea, that's an agent cause. So the thing about science is it is the study of material causes. So it intrinsically is not interested in God's role in the bringing about of things.
Mm-hmm.
So when people dedicate their whole lives to science, they get like science is meant to be the study of material causes, but they sort of get consumed with it and think of everything in the world can only be explained with material
Mm-hmm.
causes. And that's called scientism. And so I think that's a huge problem, is that scientists don't realize that they're doing that, because what I just described was philosophy, and like we have no philosophical education in America, and I think it's a huge problem. And so scientists tend to think believing in science demands that you are an atheist, but...
So it's kind of like science is inherently unspiritual. There's no higher level of like action in the world. Like
Yeah,
it's
right.
just this causes this. It's just like physical actions, and it's the study of material things, so just physical actions. But what he's describing, if I understand it correctly, is there's another level of action above that, which is spiritual action, I don't know the correct word for it, but like God action, like God affecting material things. And so when you study only the material things, you can't understand that third level or that third dimension of the spiritual effect on the physical plane. Am I understanding you correctly?
Yeah, exactly. And so because science, the study of science, is inherently materialistic or atheistic, people who spend their whole lives dedicated to it kind of forget that there's more to the world than just the scientific. And also, science only describes what is happening, but it doesn't really explain what anything really is. Like if you ask a legitimate physicist if they know what energy is or what time is, they don't really know. We just have these equations and formulations that can describe it.
Yeah.
But actually knowing what it really is fundamentally is a whole other story that's outside of the realm of science. And so going off of that, I want to know what you guys' views of, we'll start with evolution. So like both of you said you believed in evolution at one point. Now I'm assuming you don't. So what are your thoughts on it? Let's see you first, Micah. Tristan spoke a bunch.
I can't stand it at all.
What about it?
Well,
Because the word evolution itself can mean a lot of different things. So first of all, what comes into your head when you hear evolution?
what comes to mind
Yeah.
is the kind of science that I was exposed to, the atheistic science. Well, like the whole idea that we just came from monkeys is, in my eyes, super stupid. Like I can't stand that.
What about the origin of life?
The origin of life.
Yeah,
Like, where did the monkeys come from?
yeah.
If
At
we
the
came
very
from if
beginning.
we came from the monkeys, where did the monkeys come from at the beginning of the world?
God made them.
Yeah, but I mean, do you kind of know what the atheists believe about the origin of life?
They just, they think that they all just started as tadpoles and then just turned into lizards and then
Yeah.
birds, then dinosaurs, then furry little animals, then monkeys.
Yeah. So Peter, could you kind of describe? I know that you know the most about it. Can you kind of describe the evolutionist idea about the world?
Okay, yeah. So basically, they call it like a prebiotic soup, but basically just a steaming puddle of feces or whatever, trash, in the middle of the
Minerals.
ocean. Steaming pile of garbage in the middle of the ocean, got struck by lightning, and then somehow that turned into living things, like a single-celled organism, and then from that point, it's basically what he said. That living cell organ, that one single cell somehow crawled out of the ocean and grew legs and lungs and eyeballs and everything like that. So yeah, the evolutionist claim is, the atheistic claim is that we're all descended from a common ancestor. And the origin of life first started is just by a bunch of minerals sitting there, happened to get lucky enough to be struck by lightning, and that arranged them into a living thing.
So what are your ideas about that?
Well, before I get into it, first,
Okay.
is there anything else you think about evolution? Any things you agree with or disagree with about it?
Well, I believe that animals evolve to a certain point. God encoded in our genetics a certain amount of genetic variety, but I don't believe that the human genome is changing. I think that all changes are within the human genome. I think that expressed changes in like skin tone or eye color or things like that, I believe that they're all a part of our genetics. It's just based off of physical changes, environmental factors. Our genetics express different genes.
Well, what about the origin of life? What do you think about that?
The origin of life, I believe that humans were created the same exact way that they are currently at the beginning of time in 6,000 years ago or whatever. It doesn't matter exactly how many years. It's just like 6 to 10,000, whatever. And I believe that they were created as male and female, Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden.
So were they the first living creatures or the first humans?
No, I believe if you consider like trees life,
All plants and animals.
yeah. So I believe that's what is that, the third, fourth day? I believe it's the third day, and then all the animals were created the fourth day, and then all of creation was created for man. So man was the pinnacle of creation. We're meant to rule over earth and subdue it. I believe that we were created on the fifth day of or sixth. I think it's the sixth day of creation, to rule over God's earth. So I think that plants were created on the third day.
Okay, and then, so plant life already existed, but humans were the first animals. We're considering us as animals.
No, just animals were created on the day before the humans. Animals were created, and then humans were created after that.
Okay, and so all of their creation was a miraculous event by God.
Yeah.
Okay, and you saying?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and so then. Okay, well, before I get into mine, we should also get into the age of the Earth then. So you believe 6 to 10,000 years,
Yep.
and you as well,
Mm-hmm.
is the age of the Earth.
Yeah.
Okay, and why is that?
I believe that because I think that the Bible. Well, okay. Do you have any ideas about this? Do you kind of like know why you believed it's 6,000, or would you like me to explain?
Well, like, I kind of think that if you look at a hill, you know, like a hill that's like, let's say this big, right? If it was really millions of years old or whatever, it would be like this, be all degraded, be like shorter.
Mhm.
So what I want to say to everyone who believes in evolution, go touch grass, because the hill that's younger is going to be taller. The hill is this big, so it's like thousands of years old.
The mountains are too tall.
Yeah, so is your basic claim
Yeah.
that like the Earth would have decayed more
Yeah.
if it was as old as it was?
Yeah,
Okay.
in evolution.
Um,
If the Earth really evolved, it would be like the mountains would be shorter,
Mhm.
and since they're bigger, then it's like younger. So
I do have disagreement with that, just because. So tectonic plates, basically, the Earth is kind of shifting. So tectonic plates cause earthquakes, right? A big reason that mountains are as tall as they are is because the tectonic plates are still shifting, and so when the tectonic plates shift, earthquakes happen, and they kind of shift together, and when they crash into each other, kind of like waves in two separate oceans coming together, what happens is one goes up, one goes down, and mountains are created. And so an old Earth view of that would be that over billions and billions of years, mountains are created by tectonic plates crashing into each other. So that is kind of like their explanation for why the mountains are taller. But I would believe that God. I don't think that mountains were formed over billions of years. I think one of two options. I think that either God created the world with mountains in it, or earthquakes are really big and they happen a lot faster than billions of years. I think that it's possible that mountains were created in a shorter amount of years than we believe. I don't like tacking a whole bunch of time on things that are big. Like, it doesn't have to be a lot of time. Earthquakes are deadly and dangerous. I think it's possible that the mountains were created in a shorter period than billions of years. Kind of off topic, but
no, I like that. But I'm also curious for you, Micah. So, is your aging of the Earth not based on Genesis? Because that's what I expected you to say.
no, what?
I thought you were going to say you think the Earth is 6 to 10,000 years old because that's what Genesis says. But you're starting from, you think the physical evidence of the Earth shows that it's younger?
Well, I mean, I don't know.
Oh, what about you, Tristan?
yeah. So I mean, the reason that your teacher said it right is because of Genesis. So your teacher is basing it off of Genesis. You're saying that you're kind of taking it from, rather than the positive view of like Genesis taught me this, you're thinking more of like from the negative view. It can't be that old because the mountains are too tall. So I think basically kind of like roundabout way, you kind of believe through Genesis. And maybe we should do Genesis study together. But yeah, so I do believe that the Bible was created 6,000 years ago, taking the generations of man as literal years and adding up the years together from when each was born.
So for the 6 days of creation, do you believe those were literal 24-hour periods?
Yeah.
Okay. So then I think the first question I want to ask is...
Well, can we ask your views?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Okay, I should.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So as I've looked... Because I think Genesis is like the most mysterious part of the Bible, honestly. It's the hardest to understand.
Yeah.
And so I think the temptation is to take the most literal interpretation, which is what you do, which is day just means 24-hour day, and all the ages are literal. But as I've been looking into it, what I found was, I think the most persuasive argument to me was that the earth is not young, is that... So usually if I tell a Christian that I believe the earth is millions or billions of years old, they'll say, oh, you're just trying to twist the Bible to fit your scientific views. But then as I've looked into the history, I found that even some of the earliest church fathers, within like 100 or 200 years after Jesus died, so this is pre-scientific, they also did not believe in a literal interpretation of Genesis. They did not believe the days were 24-hour days, and they did not believe that the earth was only a few thousand years old. And the people I'm talking about, like the church fathers, they're like the most educated, scholarly followers of Christ. And so that really gave me the confidence to look into Genesis, thinking of it more as a theological work, where it was written not as a perfectly complete, descriptive account of history, but rather it was written by someone who was trying to combat the theology of other religions at the time. Because we're not 100% sure who wrote it. The Christian claim is that it was Moses, but that's... For me, it could be that Moses was the first person to write it down, but I believe then it was still passed down as oral traditions before him. And so I'm still interested in, like, who was that first person who said it? And so when you look into the history of it, it's likely that he was combating the creation stories of other religions. And so, like, I don't remember exactly what the details were, but, like, for example, the Greek mythology has this claim that, like, humanity was formed when the female goddess chopped off the balls of the male titan, and then it hit the ocean, and then it foamed up, and humans came out, something like that. And so, when you look at, like, the
People
details...
were crazy, bro.
Yeah, well, where we all came from is a hard question. So people had all these ideas. And so when I interpret Genesis, I'm thinking more, what are the theological truths that are trying to be communicated through this, rather than a super accurate description of history? And so the first thing is that the universe was created from nothing, which we now have the Big Bang to show us. So I think that's one of the truths that we are supposed to be getting out of it. And so, like, to go to the point of day 1, day 2, day 3, there's something called the day-age theory, where basically instead of interpreting them as 24-hour days, they interpret them as periods of creation. So, like, one of the days it says God, like, caused the plants to come forth from the earth. And so when I read that, it sounds to me like he created the earth and then let the natural processes happen, however long it took for the plants to come forth, and then he started doing the next thing. And so when I hear these days, I don't think of 24-hour days. I think of an age. That's the day-age interpretation. And another reason I think it makes more sense is because, okay, we think of a day as the technical scientific definition of a day is the amount of time it takes for the Earth to spin around once, right? Because we know about all the astronomy now, about how the Earth rotates and spins around everything. But for people who didn't know that, from a more practical sense, a day is... I mean, there's when it's light and then when it's dark. It's like one period of... It is an absolute, non-arbitrary period of time that we can ultimately use to measure our work schedules. We work when it's bright and then we rest when it's dark. And so when we're talking about God in terms of days, I think it's more appropriate to take that same approach. So on one day is a period of time that he is setting aside to do a specific job. And then at the end of every verse, God rested. And then in the next day, he did the next thing. So I think of it every day as a period of God's action rather than a period of 24 hours.
Yeah.
And so so that's like my theological perspective of it. And I think that's especially more likely now that we have so much scientific evidence for, and my background is in physics, by the way. I studied physics in college. So like, I understand things like general relativity, the Big Bang, things like that. And for my measure, none of those have any conflict with the Bible, so I have no problem believing them.
Yeah. So basically, in the same way that humans work in one 24-hour period, which is totally arbitrary, based off of our sun or us rotating around the sun, or the Earth rotating.
Yeah.
Yeah. So in the same way that that is arbitrary, and like a day on Mars is like 34 hours or something like that, because it spins slower. God's days are longer, and they're not based off of the sun, right?
Yeah, right.
They're not based off of the rotation or the sun or anything like that. So the days of creation could be whatever God's work week looks like, and that could be billions of years. So yeah, I understand.
Well, I also think it's important in their culture, the number 7, the fact that it was a 7-day creation week, 7 is like one of those special numbers. It's like a number of completion. Like for us, that number would be 10. 10 is like a special number that we always use for everything. And so it's not a coincidence that the way it was described happened to fit into a formula for like special number. That number had special significance in their culture. So I think there's just a lot of evidence to consider it. They were trying to, whoever wrote Genesis originally was trying to communicate theological truths within the context of their personal culture and language and the environment that they were around. And they were not nearly as focused on super descriptive historical truths. What do you think of that, Micah?
That was a lot of words.
Can you restate what you said in like?
Well, so how would you feel about interpreting the 7 days of creation in Genesis from a less literal perspective? Instead of thinking 7 24-hour days, think 7 periods of working and then resting for God.
7 God days.
Yeah, 7 God days of unknown time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My thoughts are just blurred.
Yeah, totally fine. So you know how I was talking about each day is defined by how
Yeah.
like the sun is there, the sun is not. That's a day. And on different planets it's different. And for God doesn't care about the sun. What if the days of creation, God's days, were not sun and then dark? Like, can you kind of understand how that would be? Do you have any problems with that?
No.
Yeah.
So you're okay with them being longer than 24 hours?
Yeah.
What about thousands of years or millions of years?
Yeah, I mean, before creation, I mean, like it could have been that. I mean,
Well, he created the universe, and then, like, day 1 in Genesis maybe took him like 1 billion years to finish. And then day 2, God did this, but actually he allowed a process that takes billions of years of time to happen. Do you think that interpretation's feasible, or do you not like it?
no, I don't. I don't think that's.
Why not?
I don't know.
Just not feeling it?
It's just.
Yeah, I feel you, bro. I understand. I think it's possible, and that was something that that as I transitioned from evolution to create, I don't know what's the non-evolutionist view of the world called. What would you call that? Young Earth. Let's just say
Yeah,
Young Earth.
Young Earth versus Old Earth.
Yeah, so that's why when I was transitioning from non-Christian to Christian, my evolutionary views kind of transitioned through a phase like that, where I understood that the Earth could have been, or Genesis could have been understood as billions of years for the 7 days of creation. So I totally understand that point of view, but I have some issues with it.
All right.
But maybe give me some time to collect my thoughts. Maybe we could go into more specifics, and I can kind of challenge specifics.
Well, I'm suspecting your first one is the genealogies in Genesis.
Yeah. Well, my first issue with Genesis is monkey to man.
Uh-huh.
I do not believe, and how come we're in a Christian debate? We don't have any Bibles. I forgot to bring my Bible, dude. Could we get a Bible?
You have one on your phone.
Okay, I do not have a
Or we can
Bible
just
app.
look things up on the computer.
Okay.
ChatGPT?
No. Bible app would be good if I could use Micah's phone.
My Blue Letter Bible app is being stupid, so
Okay.
go to the Bible.
Yeah, I should
Can't
make
believe I forgot my Bible.
Bibles are required. I honestly did assume that you were going to
Yeah.
Christian Standard
Here.
Bible.
Oh, sweet.
I think that's NIV or something.
That is fine. KJV, very interesting. Okay, you're one of those people.
Sometimes. I think it depends on, like, if I'm trying to research a specific thing, I'll
Okay.
make sure I'm doing it in a certain version. See what
That
the
kind of sounds more like Shakespeare than the Bible.
Yeah. King James had a tongue for beautiful language, but
He spoke in a different language, bro.
yeah, he spoke in tongues.
He spoke in a different language.
So basically, my biggest issue with evolution is monkey to man. So that's what I was saying. I don't think that animals are living in the same way that humans are living. I think that there's too great of a separation from man to animal for man to have come from animal. So the reason I say this is a Bible verse. I'm actually really conveniently doing a Bible study with my brother and my friend Sam right now on Genesis. So we just went through this, and our leader was talking about, let me see, God breathed into him the breath of life. Let me see. I believe it's chapter 2. It's after he creates Adam from the dust. So, yeah, I'm in the wrong chapter. It's chapter 2.
Verse 6, 7. Then the Lord God formed a man from the dust of the ground and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and the man became a living being.
Yeah, so nowhere else in the Bible does God breathe the breath of life into an animal. God only breathes the breath of life into Adam and Eve, probably. Like, I'm sure they share the same breath of life. I'm not saying women don't have that. but yeah, so when God created the animals, he said, let the creatures teem with living creatures. So living creatures, but he doesn't give them the breath of life specifically in the same way that he gives, in my opinion, of how God created man. I believe that God created man from the dust and filled his body with a few different things. I believe he gave him a mind for thinking and a consciousness. A consciousness in a way that animals don't have consciousness. So some animals simulate consciousness, like parrots can speak like a conscious being in a way sometimes, and dolphins, like they can think, and I believe ravens are capable of recognizing themselves in mirrors or pictures or things like that. But I don't think that animals, there's too great of a gap from humans to animals in consciousness and in intelligence. And animals are not able to talk to God. And so all of these things, and there's other ideas, but all of these things separate humans from animals in such a way that I can't see that jump. I can't see that jump from man to animal. Like, what is there? One generation that was not conscious, and then there was the next that was, like, from monkey to man. Like, what do you think? Like, kind of, what are your views on that?
I'm definitely going to answer that, but first I want to follow up and ask you, so how do you explain the fact that so many things look so similar to each other? Like, we look just like apes and monkeys, and there's fish that look so much like each other, things like that.
Yeah. The way that I explain that is, and I'm sure you've heard this argument before, but it feels like God was an inventor. So this is something that we went over in our Bible study a couple nights ago. And God takes several things. He takes light and he takes darkness. He takes land and he takes sea. He takes water animals, land animals, and sky animals. And then he takes humans and he puts them all together, and plants and stuff. He puts them all together, and each one, it's by itself, is good. So the trees are good, the animals are good, the earth and the water are good. Every day he says he finished, he rested, and it was good. But then it's never very good until the end of creation. So God takes all these parts and he puts them together and it becomes earth. And so it's like a car. You take all of its parts and the parts are great, but they don't accomplish their purpose, right? And so you take these parts, you put them together, and instead of just being good, they become very good. They accomplish their task. In the same way, God takes different parts, and it's kind of like the same parts. And maybe this metaphor doesn't carry over perfectly, but he takes hands and he makes them, and they're good. They're good. Like, hands are good, but they don't accomplish their purpose unless they have a human and a brain to control them. And so a hand is good, and God intelligently designed a hand for a task, and monkeys have that same task that they use for their hands. And so they grab things, and most of the time it's trees. But God thought hands would be good for a human to have also, for weapons and things. And so it's an item that was perfectly designed by God for a purpose, but he slightly adjusted it for different animals and different purposes. And so I believe that eyes are good, and so all animals share eyes because eyes were perfectly made. And so it's like God adjusts them for the animal, but I don't believe that all eyes came from the same animal. I believe God used parts that were good to make something very good in different ways. Does that kind of make sense? Do you have any questions about that?
It does. And actually, I think me and you are very much on the same field of thinking here, because basically, okay, so when you look at all the similarity between all the different species of life, I think there are basically two ways that you can interpret it. There's either common ancestry, we all came from the same thing, or common design. We were all created by the same creator, designed by the same creator. And it seems like you're just taking the second approach. And I also have that approach. And so what you said is like, you think there's too big of a gap between like a me and a gorilla for a gorilla to evolve into me. And the scientific evidence has actually shown that. So have you ever heard of Stephen Meyer? Okay, he's this...
Micah, no? No Stephen Meyer?
I think his name came up once in my biology class when I was still paying attention.
Okay.
That would be the place where he would come up. Yeah, so...
But, like, I just never paid attention.
Yeah.
Biology class, I would just zone out. I would just zone out
in
biology class in ninth grade.
Ninth grade.
Ninth grade,
Yes,
okay.
this isn't homeschool.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's okay. Public school or government school. Public school is government school. I always try to use that term because
Yeah.
to help people free themselves from the indoctrination. You should know who's indoctrinating.
And also, I just want to apologize to for what I said at the beginning of this thing when I
What?
said like go touch grass and look at mountains. I mean, like, I think that's the flesh talking to me because like I still have that thing from 8th grade, torment from 8th grade that carried on through 9th grade, and then I'm trying to do better.
Yeah.
No, I know what you mean.
So I mean, yeah, you have a hatred for like the things that you were taught in 8th grade because they made you so miserable, and so evolution is kind of like a part of that. I totally understand, and
Yeah.
I forgive you. Did Peter, you forgive him?
Oh yeah, bro. I also have bitterness and resentment towards atheism and atheists all the time. It's very easy to let it slip out.
Yeah.
That's probably the hardest part of what I'm trying to do now is not being snobby and disrespectful to atheists. Because so many of the things that atheism teaches are so stupid.
Yeah.
But
So we were talking about same creator.
Yeah, okay, Stephen Meyer. So
Yeah, Stephen Meyer.
the reason, okay, so technically he's a philosopher. When he originally got bachelor's degrees, one in physics, one in geology, and then he went on to get a PhD in the philosophy of science. And he has done a bunch of research about intelligent design, like scientifically investigating the biology of it. And basically what he has found is exactly what you've just said. So we're going to get a little scientific here. So our genetic code is made out of four... How do I put this? Okay. It turns out that human beings are, in the most fundamental sense, just like machines. Like, do you guys know who Richard Dawkins is?
No.
No? Oh, man. He's the most
Did
famous...
you learn him in biology class, 9th grade?
What was his first name?
Richard Dawkins.
Richard Dawkins.
He's this extremely famous evangelical atheist he was also a biologist who has basically spent his whole life trying to, evangelize people to be an atheist. And even he has admitted that if you were to read a publication or a journal of like high-level advanced biology, molecular biology, it would look very similar to a journal of computer science or software engineering, because the human body really does work like a programmed machine. And so what I mean by that is our DNA is made of 4 parts, 4 nucleotide bases.
That's the TGA.
Yeah, ACTG, I think.
Okay.
Adenine, cytosine, thymine, guanine. I think those are the names. Doesn't matter. And there's 4 of them. And a gene expresses itself based on the arrangement of those 4, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so fundamentally, it is exactly the same as a language. Whereas the English language has 26 letters, and most of our words are 4 or 5 letters, some longer, some shorter. The genetic code is literally a language in the exact same way, except it only has 4 letters, and each word is millions or billions of letters long. These super long genetic strings, right?
Yeah.
And so what Stephen Meyer and his colleagues have found is that in order to produce what they call morphological innovation, morphology means shape, so just like major changes in shape and functions of body parts, there's a certain threshold you need to cross to go from like a fin to an arm, and it can't happen slowly over time, because like if you're a dolphin swimming in the sea and your fins start slowly turning into arms, they're not going to be able to function as fins anymore. So like you don't have generations to get that right. So what they found is that you need enormous the way the genetic code is arranged, it's literally information. So you need enormous inputs of information within a single generation in order to get this morphological innovation. And the threshold is just way too high. So the forefront of biology, and atheist biologists know this, is that Darwinism as it's currently presented does not provide any sort of mechanism to explain how things could change so enormously in such short times. So this is Stephen Meyer's...
And when you say such short times, you're talking 20 billion years? Or 3 billion years, I guess?
Even within the few billion years that we have on Earth. It's just not enough time. Mm-hmm. Like for even any of these things to happen, like to go from whatever the closest non-human was to a human would have taken longer than the entire age of the entire universe. Like there's just not enough time with the current mechanisms proposed. So I think the most likely explanation is that God did create a bunch of stuff differently from each other, and I'm not super against the idea that we came from monkeys, but it would have had to have been a miracle by God to input the information into our genes. I just don't think there's any way that... The evidence shows that there's no way it could have happened naturally. So I'm open to the idea either that he created humans as we are, or he created a process... but then he still intervened in that process to produce miracles to create diversity.
Okay, I like that. So let me kind of explain how I perceive what you're saying.
Yeah.
So there's a few different ideas. There's 2 evolution ideas, and there's 1 creation idea. So in my opinion, probably Micah's opinion, is God created humans on the fifth day exactly the same as we are today, except our genetics have kind of degraded over time. That's part of the fall, right? God created humans exactly like humans on the fifth day or sixth day of creation. Now, the evolutionary views, there's two of them. One evolutionary view believes that humans evolved from the bacterial soup in the ocean before, or prebiotic soup in the ocean before time, 3 billion years ago, turned into a water creature, then a land creature, and then every creature that we know. But then the other view of evolution is that God started that evolution. Maybe he created the miracle of life in causing a bacteria to grow in the ocean, and then two bacteria mating, and then it just continued after that, or however it worked. I don't know exactly. And so each individual step was a miracle by God, rather than just being a product of evolution and randomly generated differences in genetics like that. So you have one evolution where it's guided by God, one where it's just guided by the natural laws of the universe. So I like the idea about God doing the miracles, because I think there's a few leaps that are way too big for evolution, standard evolution, to allow for. The first leap is that first bacteria in the ocean. I don't think it's possible for prebiotic soup, just minerals and stuff, to create life. Not even with a lightning strike, not even with a billion years.
Right.
I don't think that's possible. And then you create that leap where it starts designing, it starts evolving itself into a creature, and then that next jump is the jump from water creature to land creature, like you were saying. I don't think that makes sense. But then the most important one to me is the jump from unconsciousness to consciousness, from unintelligence to intelligence. I don't think that's possible. Now, the issue that I have with Christian evolution, even if there are miracles at each individual point, my biggest issue is, let me see, Genesis 2. Let me see.
I don't know if you can think of any words. I can control F it.
I think it's... Oh man, give me one moment. In the image of God, he created him. That's what I'm looking for.
I think that's at the end.
Man and woman. Yeah, I think you're right. End of 1. I think it's end of 1.
Let us make mankind in our image and our likeness,
Yep.
so that they may rule over the fish in the sea and the birds in the sky, over the livestock and other animals.
So Genesis 1:27, Micah. So God created mankind in his own image. In the image of God, he created them, male and female, he created them. In the image of God. I don't think that monkeys are the image of God. And so I guess the point where we would disagree, and I'm just realizing this as I'm speaking, you have a perfectly understandable disagreement. Tell me if I'm wrong. When he says created, so God created mankind in his own image, is our difference in how he created them in his own image? So like you believe that he started with not in the image of God and created it slowly over billions of years into the image of God? Or do you believe that there was some point where God created them exactly in the image of God and then they evolved? Or
Well, I think so.
God's a monkey, confirm. Sorry.
The theory that I am most that I like the most right now is the idea of election, which means that so he did create a process, and that process happened, and it involved some. Occasionally, he would come in and do a miracle to create greater change in genetic codes. So, like, there was a single cell, then he did a miracle to make multicellular, and then he maybe did another miracle to get from sea to land, things like that. And then at one point, there were a bunch of genetically equal things called humans, like us. And,
Like us or still apes?
well, so like me and you, but with the exception that they had not had life breathed into them yet. So I
Okay.
think there was a bunch of humans, and then he chose two, and those were Adam and Eve, and he breathed life into them. Well, we can get into just Adam or just Eve later, but
Yeah.
so there was already a bunch of biologically equal creatures, and then they became humans in his image when he breathed his life into them.
Okay.
That's what I think seems most likely.
Okay, so God's first covenant before Moses, before Abraham, God's first covenant was with Adam and Eve
Yes.
to work the garden and to keep it. I like that idea, and it satisfies my brain. Yeah. So basically, animals are machines without the breath of life in them, right? That's kind of what you're saying, and they evolved over time. Humans without the breath of life in them, there were biological machines called humans created on the fifth day, when God created all the other animals, created over billions of years, and then God chose two of them on the sixth day. He chose two of them to breathe the breath of life into.
Yeah.
Okay.
What's that? What do you think, Micah? Into the mic.
I'm not sure how I feel about that. I mean, like, I don't think they started off as animals and then just became humans.
So you think from the moment they existed, they had a breath of life?
Well, I think he created them in his image first and then breathed the breath of life in them, and that's... I don't know.
Right, like they were laying there lifeless until he breathed into them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So like God took him from the dust, put Adam on the floor, and then breathed into him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like the CPR.
Yeah.
Biblical CPR.
And so,
I'm so sorry. I've got to take a call real quick. I'll be right back in like 1 minute.
all right, me and Micah will hold it.
It's a work call. I'll be right back.
So then you don't like the idea I've been presenting so far of theistic evolution?
Well, what do you mean? What was the first word?
Theistic, like
Theistic?
based on God. So like God did a miracle to make the first living organism, and then there were also sporadic miracles throughout the process to go from single cell to multicellular, sea to land, things like that.
I think. Well, now that you explain it, I feel like it does have some significance, but I don't. It's like 80-20, like 20% not agree with it, 80% do agree with it. I don't know.
Well, okay, so let me ask you this: if Adam and Eve, there was no humans, and then they were created, doesn't that imply that there was incest for their children afterwards?
Possibly.
Possibly. Well, it has to be, right?
Yeah.
There's only two humans, so
Yeah.
and you don't have a problem with that?
No.
Interesting.
Now that I've been thinking about it, so
Well, do you think incest is sinful?
what?
Do you think incest is sinful?
What is incest?
Family, brothers and sisters, having children with each other.
I feel like that's just weird. Well, I feel like Adam was the first human ever, and then I feel like he breathed the breath into Adam,
Yeah.
and then just took a rib out of Adam and then closed it up into flesh, and then that's how he made Eve.
Mm-hmm.
Because Adam was...
Right, but then Adam and Eve had children,
Mm-hmm.
and then those
Cain-
kids would have had to have kids with each other, right?
Cain and Abel?
Yeah, Cain and Abel. But okay, yeah, right. So where did the other humans in the world keep coming from? If they only had two sons.
Well, Cain killed Abel and then married someone, and then they had kids.
Okay, how did he marry someone?
I don't know.
Where did that person come from?
What?
If he married someone, that person, someone else must have existed, right?
Possibly, yeah.
If Eve was the only woman, does that mean he married his mom or he went and found someone else?
I think I don't know.
Well, there's only two choices, right? Either it was his mom or it was someone else. And so I think it's important because in the Bible, I think like after Cain gets kicked out of the garden for killing his brother, he says like, God, if I go out there, they will kill me. And so like that implies that there's already a bunch of people out there.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think the idea of
I feel like they had. Yeah. I don't know how to explain. I don't.
yeah, did you see it? Yeah, to the left. There's also another one in my room.
I'm not really sure how the Earth filled up with people, but since Adam and Eve were the first humans.
Well, yeah, okay, yeah. So this is the election idea that I was offering.
Yeah.
That there already was a bunch of humans, and God chose two of them, and He's like, "I'm going to start the story of mankind with
That
you."
makes sense. That makes sense now. Yeah.
So you're at least open to that idea?
Yeah. Actually, yeah, that makes that biblical version of that you brought across with the multiple animals, then chose both two of them, and then
Yeah.
that makes sense now. So
All right, nice.
yeah,
All right, cool. Brought you over. That's divine election. He elected them to be
Yeah.
the first priest and priestess of His
Yeah.
garden. All right, nice. Well then, so bugs. But so then, for that, the way I'm presenting that theory, that still relies on a really old Earth. So, do you still have any issues with that? Or do you think it's really necessary that the Earth is only 6,000 to 10,000 years old?
I mean, like I don't think, as long as we don't say that, as long as it's not implied that it's like millions or billions of years old.
Well, I think that it is. So, what's your problem with that?
I don't know.
All right. Well, it'll be a process.
There
We'll
are a
work
lot
on
of things that I don't know.
Yeah, good. Better saying that you don't know than that you do know.
So
Than saying some stupid nonsense. Like
I
you
used
just-
to pretend that I did know about things, and that got me into a lot of trouble because I didn't know anything.
Yeah. Well, pretending you know things is why most people are atheists. All right. Did you hear what we were saying? I don't know.
Unfortunately, no.
Oh, I persuaded Micah about my idea of divine election, which is saying that there was already a bunch of humans, and then God chose these two, Adam and Eve, and then they weren't the first biological humans that existed, but they were like God saying, "I am beginning the story of mankind and man's relationship with God with you 2 and they were the first humans in that sense.
Where did all the other humans go?
What do you mean? Where did they go?
If there's a whole bunch of other humans that were like brain dead, like animals,
Yeah.
where did they go? Did they not procreate?
Well, no, they were. That's a good question. Maybe. I haven't actually thought of that. So just right off the bat, I'm thinking maybe it could be like when God breathed the breath of life into Adam and Eve, they were like the high priest and priestess of humanity. They were the mediators between man and God. And so I think when he started that relationship between man and God, he sort of, like saying he breathed the breath of life into Adam was divinely electing Adam into that role of priesthood. But from that point forward, all of humanity had that sort of relationship with God.
Okay. So Adam and Eve were the first humans in that they were elected priests, but they were still humans over other humans who were conscious. So God breathed into mankind, like all the humans, all the biological humans. He breathed life into them, but set Adam and Eve over them.
Yeah. Something like that. I've actually never thought of it this deeply, so I'm
Yeah.
just-
Maybe Garden of Eden is the temple, and God puts Adam and Eve in the temple to be high priests over the nation. And then the nation still stands. Like, it's humans outside of the garden, but God started humanity with Adam and Eve, and then put them in the garden to watch over all of humanity. So I do see flaw in that. In that, okay, this solves one issue that I understand. Adam's sons marrying Adam's daughters, right? So that's
These flies are so annoying.
yeah, they're beating
I'm
me up.
watching it terrorize.
So that's a problem that people have. It's incest, but maybe it isn't incest at the beginning of the world. Maybe there's so little genetic variation, so little genetic degradation. So the genetics are perfect. There's no issues with the genetics. Maybe in that case, you can have kids with your siblings. But in your idea, maybe they weren't siblings. Maybe they did marry women from the other humans. They were just not high priestly children. But I don't know. I don't think that's not how I understand Genesis. I think that God created two humans as the ancestors of all other humans. But that is something that I've never thought about being. God created a whole bunch of biological machines called humans and then breathed life into two of them as high priests and all the rest of them as non-high priests. Something to think about.
Yeah.
Nothing that I can like challenge with direct arguments right now, though.
Yeah, I can't get super into it either because I haven't thought that deeply. But so then also, back to the age of the earth, is that contingent upon the genealogies in Genesis for you? Like, you think the earth can only be this old because of the genealogies?
Yes.
Okay. So, there's this idea that I actually got from Inspiring Philosophy, where he cited a scholar, I think it was like John Walton or something, who did an analysis on the numbers, and he found that every single age in the genealogies given in Genesis, all of them are symbolic numbers, and it's extremely unlikely that every single one of them would happen to be like a perfect symbolic number unless the author was doing that on purpose. And so
They all end in like 3, 6, 9, or 7, right? Like something like that.
I think it was
There were like 4 numbers.
2, 5, 7, 9, I think. It was all either like 5 or 0. I don't know. But yeah, it was like they
Yeah.
all ended in like a certain set of 4 numbers. And when you have so many names, it's so unlikely that that would happen unless it was done on purpose. And so like he compared that to other genealogies in the Bible where the numbers truly are random. And you see it like that. And so when you consider that, and I think it's also that in the Genesis genealogies, there's a couple weird things. Like when Abraham, God promised him that he would have more kids than all the stars in the sky or something. But he was like, but I'm so old, how is that possible? But if you look back into the genealogies, Abraham had ancestors that were like already hundreds of years old and they were also having children. So why was Abraham confused at the idea of a 100-year-old couple having children when his ancestors have been doing that consistently, regularly?
Yeah.
That's a really big issue, I think, if you're taking the literal interpretation.
Yeah. So do you believe that Abraham was the first of the actual, like, literal ages? Like 115, or do you think his 115 was symbolic as well? Or no, I'm not. I don't know. I'm saying 115. Whatever age he was.
So honestly, for me, after looking into how it's used, I think I'm not really. My first instinct whenever I see an age in the Bible is not to interpret it literally, because especially when people wrote history in those days, like, okay, in our modern world, we have like our cameras and all these different recording devices, so we can literally get the exact version of events what happened with everything. So we have this idea of that's how history is always supposed to be done, the most to the detail exact replication of events. But when people were writing things back then, they were there was always an intention to what they were trying to communicate, and everything was written based around that. So when I'm seeing them say a bunch of people's ages, my first instinct is going to be that they're trying to give different symbolic numbers for different ideas. And so as for Abraham's age, so for most of them, I'm just not going to have an opinion. Was this literal or was it symbolic? I don't really know, and I don't really care, is my actual answer to that. So yeah, it doesn't seem like a big issue to me.
Yeah.
Knowing that it's always going to be likely that they weren't being literal, it's just not worth examining, I think.
Yeah. So I have a question for you. Or maybe I can ask this one for Micah. What do you think about carnivores in the Garden of Eden? Do you think they were all vegans? Do you think the lions and the tigers were vegans in the Garden of Eden? Or do you think they still ate zebras and all the other?
They probably were. Yeah, they probably were herbivores.
Yeah.
Really?
That's and that's something that I've been wondering about, because why would God suddenly change the biology of a carnivore or an herbivore into carnivore just after the fall? I've been thinking, like, what if very good, when God says very good, the earth was made very good, what if part of that was death? Like, what if there was death in the Garden of Eden, but just not human death? And in that way, that death was different, because the death of a human is different than the death of an animal. And when you think about, like, flies, like a fly, we don't even think about killing a fly. Like, that's nothing. And then, but as the animals, like, get bigger or more personal or whatever, like, a fly is still an animal in the same way that a tiger is an animal. But when you say, take a tiger and a human, they're not animals in the same way. And a human is so much more. A human is beyond an animal. Like, you know what I mean? Like, and so maybe when God said very good, maybe death was a part of that. And when God introduced death into humans because of Eve's sin and then Adam's sin, when he introduced death, I'm thinking now, maybe that wasn't just, or maybe that was just the death of humans. Maybe he was just introducing the death of humans, as well as the death of animals. Do you understand my point?
Yeah. Micah, you have any thoughts?
No.
I think it's possible.
Well, could be, but so if we're sticking with my idea of divine election, right? So saying there was already a bunch of humans, and I'm also claiming that the process by which God created us was evolution, which involves life and death.
Yeah.
My interpretation of it saying that, like, death came into the world or whatever it says, I think that's spiritual death. And so for us, spiritual death is going to hell rather than heaven. And I think that's the most consistent interpretation with what I believe, because before that there was nobody going to hell. There was only eternal unity with God. But then spiritual death entered into the world once humans made the choice to choose to be separate from God. What do you think of that?
Yeah, I think the Bible is really hard, and
Yeah,
and I think that
especially Genesis.
Yeah, and I think that makes sense. It's like, so humans die before Adam and Eve eat the fruit. Do you think it's a literal fruit?
Don't know. Don't care.
Okay.
Like, early Genesis, I'm so, like, locked into it being a theological story that I'm very uninterested in the literal details.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fair enough. So what did Eve do that got them kicked out of the garden?
She committed a sin of pride.
Okay. She turned away from God's commands and did what she thought was best. And
Well, I think Satan said, like, you can be like him, or
Yeah, okay.
something like that. And so even in the Catholic Church, like the deadliest of the 7 deadly sins is pride, and I agree with that as a Christian. I think pride is by far the worst thing. It separates us from God more than anything else, and so it stands to reason to me that the purpose of Eve eating the fruit, whatever the details of that story were, they were trying to say the human chose to be prideful instead of being humble before God.
Mm-hmm.
And then I guess she tempted her husband into also being. They could have eaten a little fruit.
Yeah.
Maybe they did, maybe they didn't. It doesn't make a difference to me.
Yeah.
I'm more focused on the theological implications.
I have a question.
Uh-huh.
Could it be possible that Adam misinterpreted what God told him to Eve, and that's
What do you mean?
like he told Adam, "Don't eat the fruit, or you'll surely die."
Yeah.
And could it be possible that he misinterpreted what God told him to Eve, because Eve came from a rib?
And so you think Eve didn't know that?
Well, I feel like Eve didn't 100% know. I feel like she knew half of it, or like 70% of it, but she didn't know the whole reason.
Bro, what if they're walking through the garden? Adam's showing Eve around, and it's like, oh, dude, yeah, you can eat those trees. Those are really nice, but don't eat that one. And then they just keep walking, and Eve's like, did God surely say that in the day that you eat of it, you will surely die? Because what if Adam didn't relay all that information? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then Satan twisted the words
Yeah.
in her mind and deceives her into taking that fruit.
Yeah. I think that Garden of Eden, literal fruits in the midst of the garden. I think that Adam or Eve knew that she shouldn't eat the fruit. I can't imagine that God would let Eve accidentally eat a fruit that would get her cast into hell forever.
Yeah, I have to believe that they both knew exactly what they were doing.
But that is an interesting thought.
Yeah.
Never thought about it that way.
Also I like what you said there. So you said like Adam showed her and said, but don't eat that one. And then she was like, did God really say that? You didn't mention Satan. You said like Eve thought that in her own mind.
Mm-hmm.
And so that brings me to the talking snake. So how committed are you to a literal talking snake in the garden? Are you afraid to say that you believe it was a real talking snake?
Okay, well, snakes changed before and after the fall, right?
Or they had legs at first?
Yeah. Okay.
Either way, reptile. Talking reptile.
Yeah, talking reptile. I've thought about that before, and I don't think that there's a literal talking snake. I wonder, I don't think there was a literal talking snake.
Yeah, I'm there too. Like, it could have been, sure.
Yeah.
But especially when you know that, like, so like we have symbolic numbers, we also have symbolic animals too. Like different animals.
Mm-hmm.
Owls represent wisdom. Eagles represent patriotism.
Yeah.
Courage.
America.
Yeah, and so like, so back then, if someone's talking about a snake, they're talking about a dirty, disgusting.
Everyone knows what a snake is.
Yeah, exactly. And so, when you consider the person who was telling that story for the first time, like, I don't think to say that story was inspired by God, it doesn't mean that God was like dictating like a giant booming voice out of the sky to him exactly what happened. It seems like this person had a proper theological understanding of man and our relationship with God, and he told a story that would properly communicate to whoever the audience was. And so I think the snake was just like, the slithery, dirty voice of Satan, really. It represented Satan.
Mm-hmm.
And ultimately it was her pride. So that's another thing also that takes me away from gives me more confidence in not interpreting Genesis literally, which helps me more believe in an old earth rather than the young earth.
Yeah.
And elected humans rather than creating two humans from the beginning.
I fear, like there's some parts of the Bible that I for sure take not as literal, but I fear taking a a lot of Genesis as not literal, because the further and further you go away from literal, the more and more man is involved, and the more his mind is involved, which is a gift from God to think things through and to take natural laws and apply them to the Bible. But it's like it's stepping out onto the turbulent waters of man's ideas and subject to change. And so that's a big reason why I fear taking the days not as literal, the garden not as literal, and Adam being the first man not as literal. I don't have anywhere I was going with that, but I do fear.
Well, I have a response to that though.
Yeah.
So you're saying there are potential risks to moving away from not being literal enough, from being too symbolic or theological. But there are also risks to interpreting it too literally. Can't you consider any of those? Like a big problem with the Pharisees when Jesus was around was that they were way too legalistic and they were enforcing the law way too hard than they shouldn't have been. And like Jesus said, Sabbath was made for man, not man made for the Sabbath. And he also you've seen it written, but I say to you, you've seen it written, don't commit adultery, but I say to you, if you lust after a woman, you've already committed adultery. And so I think that's...
He also says, if your eye causes you to sin, cut it out.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Your hand causes you to sin, cut it off.
Yeah.
Yeah. So...
Didn't he also call them blind to leading the blind?
Yeah.
that wouldn't surprise me. I don't
Yeah.
remember the quote, though. Yeah, so I think, do you guys call yourself Protestants? Do you know what Protestant is? Yeah, okay. So, Protestants have this belief in sola scriptura. You familiar? Just all we need is the Bible. And I take an issue with that because what that really means in practice is that everyone can pick up a Bible and instantly automatically interpret it correctly without any help or without any further study. And I think that's obviously wrong because there's so many denominations. We all obviously are not interpreting it the same way. And so if you're claiming the Bible is perfect, therefore if I pick it up and read it, I'm going to get the correct message, you're really making a claim about your own ability to interpret something. And so I just think you're sort of taking the stance that if we default to a literal interpretation of the Bible, that's the safest way, because then we're not going to accidentally muddle it with human interpretation. But I think there is no default way, and no matter what you're reading, you should always go into it with the maximum amount of, be as careful as possible, be willing to put in the work as much as possible to interpret it correctly.
And that's why God set people over his church, and that's why God gave the church intelligent minds to come together and kind of figure things out. That's a thing that I really like about the Catholic Church and about the Orthodox Church, that they really care about what their people said when they came together. And I think that when the church comes together to try and figure something out, I really think that God will lead that. I think that the Catholics took a few wrong turns in doing that.
Yes.
But I think that a lot of those things can be figured out by the church coming together and figuring them out. I don't think anyone can just interpret the Bible and understand it perfectly.
Nice. So that's actually a good segue because I wanted to get into this. So we'll move away from Genesis now and talk about the Catholic and Orthodox versus Protestantism.
Okay. And just warning you, I will have to go at 9:50 because I've got to go to a call.
Oh, 5 minutes? Are you
Yeah,
kidding
I'm
me?
sorry, dude. I really, until yesterday at 8 in the morning, I had no idea I was going to be doing this. My boss was like, hey, bro, it's going to be 107 tomorrow. Can you take care of this for me? And he's like, yeah, okay.
107 degrees?
Yeah. I think it's now it's 101.
Oh my gosh.
But,
This
yeah.
is- don't come to Phoenix, people. This is...
Where we live, though, it's only 90, so I had no idea. It's only getting up to 90.
I feel like New York is worse.
Yeah? So I heard it's supposed to be 50 and raining soon.
All right.
Yeah, it snows up there.
Yeah.
All right, then we'll do closing statements.
Closing statement. I'm sorry to cut this short, dude. I'm sorry. But we'll do it again because
Yeah,
this
it's
is so
okay.
stimulating. I love it.
Yeah, I'll definitely do it again. Let's see. All right, so quick. Well, well, this will be our segue into next time.
Okay.
So, quick thoughts on why aren't you a Catholic or an Orthodox? How about that? Why Protestant?
That was something that I was really on the verge. I was going to go to an Orthodox church and I was going to see, but I
Like when
found
you were 16, you mean?
right before I found Valley Life.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so that was like a year ago, 2 years ago.
Uh-huh.
Not Catholic, Orthodox.
Yeah.
The reason I'm Protestant is because I believe that Orthodox, and I'm not 100% sure about Catholics, so I'm figuring that out. But I think that Orthodox and Protestants and a lot of Catholics are still Christian. And so I think it's okay that when you find a group of Christian believers who are gathering together and teaching the Word of God and worshiping God, I think that you can join them. And I think that God can be worshipped in different ways, in the Orthodox way, in the Catholic way to some extent, and to the Protestant way, in the Protestant way. So I think that the reason that I am Protestant is mostly because most of the Christians around me are Protestant, and because the church that I go to is Protestant. I believe that, and I don't find a whole bunch of issues with Orthodox.
Okay, yeah. So you haven't deeply investigated the truth claims of each denomination. You're
Yeah.
sort of just going with the flow right now. And you?
I'm Protestant just because, okay, so my mom is Protestant, and after I came to Christ, we were going to a different church, but I told mom to, go back to Valley Life, so we're going back to Valley Life. So, yeah, but I feel like the reason why I'm not in tune with Catholicism is I've done a lot of studies on Catholicism, and what Pope Francis did, the last pope, with he allowed the worship of false gods,
I think I know what you mean.
and also he also said that every single religion is a way to arrive at God.
He was dangerously universalist. That's
Yeah.
why I have a big problem with the Catholic Church.
And like, if you like, I don't agree with that at all, because that's basically saying that God's not the only truth, that He's just
Yeah,
a
right.
truth.
It just doesn't make sense.
Yeah, and he also tried to say that we all pray to the same God. I don't pray. We don't pray to the same God. I don't bow down to Allah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't bow down to any golden calf. And what Moses did I feel like that was just giving the Israelites a taste of their own medicine.
What, when he destroyed it?
Yeah, when he gritted it into powder, mixed it into water, and made them drink it.
Oh, wow. That's
Yeah.
hardcore.
And then he sprayed like cow blood all over them.
Yeah.
He just started throwing cow blood at them.
Yeah.
Good. They deserve it.
Yeah.
They deserve it. So I feel like that's the reason why I'm not with Catholicism.
So,
Yeah. Infallibility. That's why I'm not a Catholic. Infallibility of the Pope.
okay, yeah, that's
And
one
also,
of the major reasons.
and also technically the Pope is seen as sinless, and also, like the head of the church,
Yeah.
which
All right.
I don't agree with. So yeah.
Yeah.
All right, so...
Peter's closing statements.
No, closing
All right.
statements, Sacred Circle Podcast. Don't forget to tune in every Saturday. Don't have an exact schedule yet. Whatever works for Tracy. That's the time that we do
I'm
these.
sorry. We'll figure it out. We'll figure it out.
So next time we will talk about the different denominations and stuff.
Yeah.
All right, thanks for coming on, boys.
All right.
Good
Sweet.
podcast.
Yeah.
How do I turn this thing off?
Figuring that out for the first time.
Oh, yeah. Well,